Every competitive game has dominant and not so dominant characters. However, there's times where dominant characters are healthy, and there's times where they're simply not. In today's video, I'll be going over what I believe makes a top tier damaging for a game, and why not all characters should be top tier for the game to be healthy. Not necessarily in the sense of if they're overtuned or broken, but in the sense that if they were meta-defining or game warping, the game probably wouldn't be super fun or interesting to play. To start though, let's define the different type of top tiers so we're all on the same page. I came up with these terms myself since there's no Merriam-Webster for plat fighters, so bear with me as we go through them. I'll try and source a variety of games in my examples as well, since even though this is a Rivals 2 focused discussion, the game hasn't had any egregious top tiers. Let's start by talking about meta-centralizing characters. They're commonly super unhealthy and are really overtuned and strong, so players are either forced to pick them, or a counter to them in the form of an anti-meta. Some common examples of meta-centralizing characters are Smash 4's Bayonetta, who would commonly end games in 3 to 5-ish interactions, Brawl's Meta Knight, who had great mobility, frame data, combos, and everything you could want in a character, Dragon Ball FighterZ's Labco Android 21, who was so overtuned that she took the whole top 8 on her own in multiple brackets, and Pokemon VGC's Kyogre Zacian team, which was able to both outspeed and outpower most other duos in the 2022 metagame. If I had to give an example of a Rivals 2 character that was meta-centralizing or clearly overtuned, it'd be Crag in the Genesis X beta bracket, who could get huge combos off of just up air alone and nasty gimps with cargo throw. However, I don't really think this fits the criteria, since it was only for one weekend. As I said, Rivals 2 has done a really good job balancing, so it's really hard to find clear examples here. Another kind of top tier is the balanced top tier. Of course, that's not an official term for these, and obviously it's a bit of a conundrum, but these characters normally have some kind of weakness or counterplay while still possessing a strength that lets players push them a little further than the rest of the cast. These characters are normally common in competitive play, but shouldn't fill up top 8s on their own or be over-centralizing. Some good examples of these are Melee Fox, whose lightweight and fast fall speed make him a glass cannon, Rivals 1's current iteration of more or less all of its top tiers, and the dive comp in Overwatch, which is notable for its fast rushdown playstyle that can be outpoked or outbunkered. I also think Joker from Smash Ultimate fits here. He was clearly dominant, but not to a degree that he won every match or became a must-pick. If I had to make a Rivals 2 character fit this definition, it'd probably be Crag at launch of Rivals 2. He was clearly really strong and had a lot going for him, but he was also huge and heavy, making him easy to combo, as well as having a rough recovery, making him easy to gimp. These themes came together to make a character that was obviously dominant, but very beatable and more or less fair. Finally, the last kind of top tier I want to talk about today, and the one we'll talk about for the rest of this video, is the game warping top tiers. These are notable for changing how the game is played against them in a way that's normally either not intended or a little unfun. Obviously, matchups change from match to match, but these characters are known for flipping the game even further on its head in a skewed and unhealthy way. A few examples of this are Smash Ultimate's Kazuya, who gets a lot of armor or iframes on moves, as well as massive combos that can lead to 0 deaths or incredibly early kills, Overwatch 1's Goat's Comp, which forced players to pick a combination of 3 tanks and 3 supports to outlast enemies instead of directly killing them quickly, Smash 4's Cloud, which is kind of a loose one, but he had Limit, which acted as a permanent buff and gave him access to a crazy kill move, or, as we all know, Steve in Smash Ultimate, which can kinda do anything the player can imagine better than most other fighters in the game, all while camping and getting stronger throughout the match, forcing unsafe approaches. Truthfully, there's really not a Rivals 2 character that fits this description very well at all, since the weirdest characters in Rivals have yet to be added to the game. I think characters like Fleet and Clarin both have unique counterplay, but both of them were only peeking into the top tier conversation for a few patches at most each, and neither of their counterplay is so crazy that it completely shakes up how the game's played, so I don't really think they fit here. Before I continue the discussion, by the way, I just want to ask if you can like or subscribe to the channel. I've been doing my best to output 2 videos or so a week discussing Rivals 2, and I use the revenue made from AdSense on here to fund both my local and my online weeklies, since I live in a pretty small region. So it'd mean a ton if you help boost the content. Let's get back to the video though. This leads us into the actual discussion and theory part of the video, being what characters should never be top tier so that top tiers are always the balanced variety, and not the meta centralizing or game warping variety, as stated earlier. Characters that have widely different game plans and counterplay, and characters that would need crazy number changes would all be a little fun to have to consistently combat, especially if they were really good. Our examples of Fleet and Claren in Rivals 2 is a good place to start. If either of these characters were notably strong compared to the rest of the cast, their unique kits, being Claren's ability to stunlock you and change out disadvantage in CC is applied, and Fleet's ability to combo in the air so well, and Ledge Guard and Ledge Trap incredibly well, combined with whatever would make them top tier, be it insane frame data, combo, or kill setups, or great offstage presence would make them really unfun to fight, which would definitely lower the morale of the community. This is not to say these characters should never be good or should always be bad. Truthfully, I think they're both in fine balanced states currently, but could each use a few teeny tiny little buffs. But they would probably be really unfun to play against if they were the central piece that the meta revolved around. This idea can also be applied to characters like Loxodon, or even my baby boy Arcane. Loxodon's big axe means that players have to carefully play around his large moves and find openings, not necessarily just with their move, but also with their movements. This makes fighting him in neutral a lot more difficult for stubby characters, but it's made bearable by his heavy weight and poor recovery. However, I don't think it'd be quite as bearable if we took the shackles off and suddenly he was able to run down the competition. Arcane's the same way. His slippery movement, insane frame data, and huge potential punishes push the character's neutral and advantage to insane levels, but his wonky recovery and bad air drift hold him back, which is good. He should have these downsides to keep the game balanced and add layers of counterplay that you wouldn't necessarily see if he was uber tier broken, like some of the examples mentioned earlier. These ideas, however, can apply to other games. Take Smash Ultimate for example. I have a feeling most of my viewers are at least slightly familiar with it, and watching Rivals 2 content because they either tried the game and didn't like it, or fell out of love with it over time as I did whenever the meta set in. This meta proved to be really annoying. Characters felt like they got lots of bonus kills or damage for not doing an equivalent or fair amount of work. Sure, not every character should be the same difficulty, but when characters require minimum difficulty, or don't require a full understanding of fundamentals to dominate the meta, obviously the game would feel stale. In this same sense, however, it's also safe to say that characters like Simon Belmont and Samus, who are notably less interactive and more zoner-esque than not, would also be super unfun top tiers to fight. We can see this in an example in Min Min, who's clearly terribly designed. She had her fun in the sun for a few months, with the game being a game-warping top tier. She completely changed the way players had to play for the worse, and ruined a large amount of the competitive integrity until she was nerfed. This, however, is a common trend in ult, since top tiers tend to rely more on gimmicks or ways to force players to play their specific tricks, than necessarily play to the core gameplay of a platform fighter. This section here isn't just to solely rag on Smash Ultimate, by the way. I'd want to do that in a full video. But characters like Pit, Link, Peach, and even Mewtwo are all really well designed, and they take up spots across the tier list, showing that well-designed, healthy characters don't necessarily need to be top, mid, or low tier. This same idea can also be seen in Rivals 2 as well. I'd argue all the characters that I mentioned earlier when discussing the game are all in healthy spots. They don't need to be top tier to be in their best state for the game as a whole. Obviously, this can be difficult to unpack, since each of us do have a bias that if our main was better, then the game would be a lot more fun. But would it be more fun for players fighting against you? I'd imagine probably not. This isn't to say that every character or fighter that has a unique mechanic should be stuck in low tier jail forever, and I personally feel like the Rivals 2 devs and the Balance team have done a great job making each fighter fun to use and fight against, which is what makes a game healthy and thriving. A good example of this, with the game being healthy due to its meta, is Melee. All the top tiers in the game are really unique compared to the other characters, and they all have some form of counterplay and unique interactivity except maybe Jigglypuff. But even then, she's not super common in the metagame. We talked about Melee Fox earlier, but I'd go as far to say that every top tier in Melee fits the description of being a more fair and balanced top tier. They all have some sort of strength, but it's honed by a weakness or a blind spot that keeps them from being super frustrating to fight against. To wrap up the video, I did want to talk about the future characters coming to Rivals 2. We know the entire base cast is returning, which means characters that players didn't find the most exciting to scrap with are on their way back sooner or later. Fighters I normally heard complaints about ranged from Olympia to Eliana, Palm, Shovel Knight, Mullo, and Hodan. I could go on, but I personally enjoyed fighting all these fighters, and I'm sure a lot of you did too. I know they weren't super popular though with a vocal part of the community. This imposes a big challenge on the Rivals team to both come up with ways to maintain the healthy and fun parts of the character identities, while tuning them down to be less polarizing to play against. I think so far, from the Olympia trailer and the Edalist launch, they've done a pretty good job. We can see details that they may have been reworked or overhauled to make them flow smoother, or have new moves to use or new counterplay in the new Rivals 2 engine. Edalist obviously had a rocky start balance-wise, but he's in a much better place now. And shrinking Olympia a bit and potentially making her lighter could also maintain the general flow of her kit, while also giving her some form of counterplay. They've also already acknowledged these problems in some dev interviews, so knowing that they're thinking about these problems when they start to design a character gives me a lot of hope. And it shows the dev team actually understands the game on a complete level, instead of just from a competitive or a casual point of view. I'm personally really confident that the team will get these details right, but only time will tell. Balancing a game is really tricky, however, since you do have to consider not only the fighter's power, but how much of that power comes from actually interactive mechanics, and how much of it is kind of just free intrinsic value. That just about wraps up my idea on why some characters probably shouldn't ever be top tier. I know this video is a lot more opinionated, and there aren't really hard black and white rules. I think a lot of things influence players getting fed up with top tiers, like the time since the last patch, or how common the character is within the groups they play in. I think this is why Smash Ultimate top tiers, though, stick out like a sore thumb, since they're all super common and the game doesn't receive a lot of balance changes, if any at all. Let me know in the comments down below if you would agree or disagree with any of my takes today, and what other characters within Rivals or other games you think meet the criteria to not need to be a top tier for the game to be in a good, healthy space. I don't normally like to do 100% opinion-based content like this either, so I just wanted to say a big thanks to all the commenters and Last Talk Discord members who helped me build this video over the past few weeks by weighing in and giving their takes. I always love to hear from y'all, so if there's a discussion topic you'd like to see me tackle, feel free to comment it down below. I do my extra most bestest to read all the comments and reply to them, and I really appreciate y'all watching until the end and interacting with the content. Thanks tons, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now!